Hey, welcome back to another Quarantine Chat with the Kamikaze team. Today, we are excited to be talking to Robert Jeffrey II. He's a writer and journalist. He's done multiple award-winning pieces of work, such as Route 3, Radio Free America, Mind to Avenge, and DC's Green Lantern. He's also the editor-in-chief for BlackSci-Fi.com. Welcome to the show, Robert. How are you?
Doing okay, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention in the intro that you and Takeia Marie are working or have worked on an upcoming short story, Son of a Jackal, which is going to be part of the Kamikaze Short Circuits anthology.
Which I can't get to print.
First of all, we were so excited when you agreed to that because, like, you are something like you're someone that we really looked up to in the comics industry.
Oh,
so
wow! Okay.
We were thinking, like, when we were talking about the anthology, like, can we get Robert?
Thank you. Well, I mean, like, that we're kind of reversed that. I think I mentioned to Carrie and Alan, what is this behind the scenes in info or whatever, but when we met at the coffee shop, one of my bucket list goals was to contribute something to the Kamikaze universe. So, as a fan, I'd always seen y'all at shows and picked up the books, read the webcomic, and, wanted to shoot my shot. So, the stars aligned and all that good stuff. So,
yeah. And it was such a mind trip for me when you said that, because, like, we always saw you guys, promoting Route 3 at shows, and like, oh man, like he's up here.
Yeah, we're just like,
so, maybe someday we'll have
he's worked with Z professional. Tiny little comparison.
I appreciate it.
And by the way, so this year's crazy. How have you been staying occupied and staying sane this year?
So I do pray, so I pray a lot, but I've been keeping busy, strangely enough, with a lot of freelance work with, not say a lot, but with a bit. And it's been very helpful with kind of, trying to keep my mind at ease, with everything. And but it's also I'm doing something that I love in order to bring money into the house or to help the household out. So that's always, as long as I can maintain that, my frame of mind is good. That's family comes first and foremost at this point. Family being my wife and a old dog. So, but creatively, even outside of the client work, I've been jumping back on. Trying to flesh out ideas because I have the time to do that when I'm not doing the client work. So, that's why I think Route 3 is gonna, out by the end of this year, the second story arc of Route 3 as far as the scripts will be done. So,
awesome.
But it's been kind of a, what do you say, smorgasbord of kind of vibes, feelings. Watching. I try to not watch the news as much, but I also want to stay informed. But watching the news kind of brings in tow, kind of a melancholy, excuse the language, peed off vibe, depending on whatever the day brings. But for the most part, I've been blessed. Everybody can't say that. So I've been good. We're doing all right.
Yeah, I know you took a Twitter break not too long ago, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How was that?
It's been great. So one of the things that, I'm not a social media maven. I try to do my best to kind of spread the word around, and that's not a bad thing. Actually, if I have the funds, I would hire somebody to maintain the social media aspect of things.
Yeah.
So because I was getting all these updates, notifications from people that I was following, and on my end, it had gotten to the point where I think I had allowed so many notifications to come through that I wouldn't have the time to stop all those notifications. So I just decided to just cancel, delete the app, from my phone. But, on my computer, I can check it like once a week. And also, most of my interaction, with people online tends to come through Facebook and Instagram. So it seemed kind of pointless to have another social media app on my phone, which was taking up space, which was, sending me notices, which I wasn't reading all the time. And also it kind of gives you a breather, sorts. So I think like that day I decided to just kind of delete all my apps from my phone, and Twitter was the only one that didn't come back. So,
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually deleted Facebook last year. I've been without Facebook for a year, so I know what you're talking about. It's just so much better for your mental health.
Yeah, and I'm still getting work, so I'm good. So I'm good.
So like, do you instead get your news from like an actual news site? Like, how do you find that balance between like distancing yourself from the news but also staying informed?
So, I'll check into, we have CNN here at the house, NPR, those are actually two of the main ones, the two biggest ones that, I'll jump in and out of. And, if I'm checking the Facebook feed, what articles pop up there. But for something like CNN, even then I have to kind of take a break. Because, some days maybe it'll be on in the background, and then, and some days, it's not. So, you just have to take it piecemeal, because if you kind of inundate yourself with all of this information, your mind is just like, you just turn into I started playing the Marvel's Avengers recently, and one of my favorite characters is the Hulk. So at certain points, like I will Hulk out because I'm watching CNN. Like I think this last week when, the revelation of the Bob Woodward interviews with Trump, I was like losing my ish around the house because, of the news that came out. So I had to take a break at that point. So, yeah, that's usually what I try to do.
Yeah, that's completely understandable.
It's
a tenuous balance around here too. We're kind of cord cutters here as far as like TV. We have like Roku and stuff like that. So I think a lot of what we do for news is probably, unfortunately, through Twitter. It kind of creates this unhealthy cycle where it's like, check, really upset about the news. You need to find out about what happened next, and it just
You got to break the cycle.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So I know like Atlanta's Dragon Con passed us recently. Whenever I would go to conventions, I would look forward to seeing you. You're like at every convention. Are there any conventions that you missed this year, or do you like how do you feel kind of missing the convention circuit this year?
So I'm missing the conventions. I'm missing the cons, because that's, my joke is always going to the cons reminds me of like a family barbecue. You're at your table, you're pointing off in the distance and say, "Hey, what's up? What's up?" And, the cons are sometimes the only ways that you can kind of see, these people in person throughout the year. So I guess the big one that I'm missing was, of course, Dragon Con, because that's, in our backyard. And I've been doing that as a fan and then as a creator ever since 2000. I think I've missed like 2 or 3 years, since 2000. So Multiverse Con is, they're going to have a virtual convention that I'll be a part of, but this is going to be their second year in person. So I really wanted to check that out. MomoCon is cool. MomoCon I miss. And out of state, what's the other one? Actually, in-state, Tony Cade's convention, the Atlanta Science Fiction and Fantasy Expo, and out-of-state New York Comic Con. I went to New York Comic Con for like the second time last year, and
as a creator, or
I'm sorry,
as a creator or attendee?
Yeah, as a creator looking for work, and that didn't happen. But hey, I have fun. But Yeah, that was the closest that I've ever been to like San Diego Comic-Con. So
Yeah.
as a fan and as a creator, that was like assaulting my senses to the point where
Yes.
I was just like, I gotta do this again. It's like I got my fix. So and New York is just a beautiful city. So that's
Yeah.
that's where my dad's side of the family's from, and I've been up there a few times, and I love it. That's always, to me, it's one of those missed opportunities to not have lived up there for a little bit. But yeah, those kind of 3 or 4 conventions are the ones that
Yeah.
kind of missing out on the most.
Yeah.
Definitely. It's a couple of small ones, a couple of big ones. I mean,
Exactly.
Alan can attest, we went to New York Comic Con once, and I almost fainted from how, like, just like, you're just completely immersed in all, like, the geekiness.
Writing and MomoCon are assaults on the senses. Like, I have to say, like, New York Comic Con is a full outright siege. Like, it's a whole extra level.
Yeah, it's I love conventions, but I tend to get, I don't know, what is it when you have a fear of crowds? It's not agoraphobia.
Yeah, technically is a agoraphobic.
Oh, it's agoraphobia. Okay, so basically it's like going to Dragon Con for me is just like stress levels through the roof. And I remember at one point Havana was talking to me on like this little group chat we had. She's like, "It's so good you're not here. Like, I miss you, but this was the right call." So, it was really cool to see like all the pictures and stuff.
Yeah.
You guys, I think that was the year the She-Ra first came out, wasn't it?
Oh, nice.
Something like that. It was, no, it must have been his first year, because I remember seeing it. I was like, really, I don't know if whether She-Ra is going to be a successul reboot or not. I mean, the art style looks.
He was wrong.
Yeah. And I will own my wrongness. I'll own my wrongness on that one.
So unfortunately, Takeia couldn't be on here due to a mishap on my end, but you two worked on the upcoming short story, Son of a Jackal, which actually revolves around Orson, which I'm very excited about. I was curious, what made you pick Orson as a character to focus on?
So, Orson, when I read through, it was the first, trade, collected trade for Kamikaze. Orson was one of those characters that stood out, to me. And I've always had a, thing for well-written, men or women of mystery. And, we don't know too much about them, and you want to find out more about them. And that's kind of where, where it was. So like as a writer, my interest was very, very much so peaked, when it came to Orson. And one of the things that I loved about, him was that he has this role in a sci-fi dystopian, future. So, definitely we have examples of, characters like that. You think about Sam Jackson as Nick Fury, or even, I remember there was a character from X-Files who, I can never remember his name, but he was like the smoking man. He was always the guy in the shadows. So, we've had a couple of examples. And then if you want to take it further, think about Amanda Waller, with DC, with Suicide Squad. So, but to have Orson, playing this role in this kind of huge creative landscape that y'all had created, in the future, people always say, you won't see Black people in the future. And I'm just like, okay, well, we're not going to die off anytime soon. So seeing Orson in his role with that backdrop was pretty awesome. So, he's just always kind of stood out to me.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I know he's always been one of those characters that as the writer, I always sort of struggle with, because I'm like, okay, how much information do we give?
Right.
How much do we not give? Like, and then like, how do we deliver it? So there's been points where I have to admit, when I was reading your script, I'm like, Orson he seemed so effortless for you. Like, he came across the page and it was so on point and so easy. And I'm just like, Orson, why can't you work with me like this? But you just did such a good job, and I love how, like, again, one of the things I always worry about with Orson and our way is that, you know, he is so mysterious and he has like all this, you know, he's very professional, knows what he's doing, but there's this, you have to like ride that line of like almost roboticness. You don't want him to seem robotic. And I want him to be incredibly human. And what I love about what you did in Son of a Jackal is you made him all the more, like you gave him more of that humanity that I feel like a lot of people don't really understand, at least understand quite yet through the story, because we've been able to get so far. So I love that we can see more of that humanity coming through him. And yes, he is confident, but there's points where, you know, he has to question himself. And I love that you played with that so well. Just
Thank you.
so proud of the work that you did. Like, I didn't really work on it all, but it's like I read it and I'm just like, wow, Robert did such a good job.
Thanks. Yeah, it makes me happy to, like I said, to hear that, you know, coming from you, Carrie, and the feedback that I've gotten from the team about the story just overall makes me pretty excited, you know, to see, you know, what the kamikaze fan base will be able to experience, you know, when they check out the story. I also, you know, when it comes to bringing his story to life, I definitely want to give a lot of props and shout outs to, I would say, my partner in crime, Takeia.
Right.
This is, I think I mentioned this to you before, this is our first published work together.
Oh, wow.
And Takeia and I have been, you know, friends for, you know, for a few years now, and we've tried to find a way to, you know, bring our skills together, because she's also a very talented writer, but she kicks a lot of butt when it comes to the artwork. So I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. She's a large part as to why we get to see the complexity in this man, you know, that you probably haven't gotten a chance to see before. Because, you know, when we had that meeting, you know, she was at the top of my list.
Right.
You know, I was just like, yeah, this is because she can handle, one of the things I feel, you know, makes a great comic book is a character. And, you know, we can definitely have those awesome 2-page spreads where the action is, you know, fierce. And, you know, there's a sense of, you know, action, everything's just kind of laid out. But, you know, just conversations, I feel, you know, between two characters, like, you know, early on where it's between Jack and Orson, you know, they're at a park, you know, and things are very tense, you know, and there's a lot that's being said and there's a lot that's not being said, which I feel is just as important as kamikaze, you know, jumping over the, you know, the rooftops, you know, and so being able to kind of handle that balance in the storytelling, rather than, you know, just being a pinup artist, which is not bad. You know, you can just be a pinup artist, but I feel that in order to, a true test of a great storyteller when it comes to the art is telling a story. So, and I think she does that pretty well. So, yeah, I just, so I was grateful for the, to have a chance to work with her, but then also to be able to kind of write a script that y'all like we're happy with. So, because like if y'all had come back like the first draft and say, yeah, there's a lot that's not working, I think I would have thrown down. Bucket list be damned. So.
But no, I agree with you. I think Takeia's like, she has a really good way of like framing the environment and framing the scene to reinforce the story and reinforce like tension, but also just like these awkward silences, you know? And one thing I did notice about your script was I was lettering the pages, and one thing that really stood out to me, because we have seen a lot of comic scripts, you know, working in the industry, you have a really good sense of pacing. Like, that is something that's really hard to do for a lot of writers, you know, like, if you only have 12 pages, how do you like tell a full story? But also to your point, it's not just like bam, like constant dialogue. It's like these pauses as well. Like it was so obvious that you are like a professional. What's the key to pacing in a comic?
So, this is going back to Terminus Media. Remember, my background is journalism. So I think journalism, and growing up, I wrote a couple of like fiction stories, like novels. Like one of them was called Robert's Time Travel Machine, and then Robert's Time Travel Machine 2. Those will never see the light of day. So I didn't, I didn't start learning how to write a comic book until I joined up with Terminus. So one of the things that stuck with me when I was getting these lessons via, and you guys know Tony Cade, Tony Cade of Challenges, Games and Comics, is you want to keep them turning the page. So the last panel of that page it has to be something that keeps the story moving along at a pretty decent pace. You don't want it to move too slow. You don't want it to move too fast. You want it to just be enough that it keeps people interested. And I know that's kind of like a very basic definition, and maybe it's more complicated than that. But for me, that's what I kind of shoot for. There's so one of the other things is in indie comics, there are a lot of independent comics out there, and when it comes to writing my own stuff, creator-owned work or client work, as in this case, I have to give the person a reason to want to read this book. So if I can't do that, then I feel that my time has been wasted, the client's time has been wasted, and the person reading this book won't even give us a shot. So I think for me, all of that goes into trying to, get the story moving at such a pace that, folks are going to stay interested in it. And I found that doing like a page-by-page breakdown of the story versus just, doing an outline and then jumping into a script, that doesn't help me out because I have to know where, the beats are going to land. So that's actually one piece of advice I can give the people if they don't do that. Do a page-by-page breakdown because that'll let you know what's hitting and what's not. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good one. So in addition to writing comics, you also run a pretty prolific website, blacksci-fi.com. Can you tell me a little bit more about how that site came to be?
Yeah. So way back when in the mid-aughts, this is getting crazy, man. I'm like 38 and like mid-2000s. The early and mid-2000s are like a long time ago.
Years ago.
Years ago. The site was created by Maurice Waters and might have been one other person, but Maurice he's the, let's say, co-founder or founder. He'll correct me on it when he sees this interview. And he's the owner of blacksci-fi.com. So the goal with the website was always to be a place where we talked about this kind of off air. You saw that Black people existed in these fantastical worlds that we love. We weren't always the comic relief or the sidekick. We were creating these stories that we all loved. When it comes to speculative fiction, and in addition to that, we do have a kind of a major goal of pushing the fact that people of color exist in the STEM world. So science. I think it's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Yeah. So on the fiction side and the nonfiction side, we were just, we on a regular basis, we just kind of, show that we are contributing to these worlds and that we exist in these worlds. Yeah. I think we've gotten really good traction on articles featuring, we did an interview with Nichelle Nichols like a while ago. We have very awesome op-ed pieces from our writers who are very talented. And we even do like top 10 list, who are the best Black superheroes for DC Comics and, things like that. Nice. So it runs a gamut, and we have a pretty solid, social media presence when it comes to Instagram and Facebook. We need to work on Twitter a bit more, but Facebook and Instagram, if you follow us on either of those pages, we are also highlighting news which doesn't necessarily pop up on our website, so that way you can kind of keep abreast of what's going on. But that's the kind of the main goal of Maurice Waters' vision, for the website.
Nice.
Wow, that's really cool. I know, you know, and I think there's been a lot more like stories. I mean, there's shows like Watchmen, for example,
Yeah.
that came out last year, and Lovecraft Country this year, and like I think your work, even your work and Takeia's work, they both kind of shine a light on oppression and racism and political issues like that. Like, in your mind, how does fiction help viewers and readers understand these issues?
It kind of shines a light on the issues. It puts up a mirror to the issues in such a way that you're learning, but you're also being entertained at the same time, which is kind of strange. So for myself and even my wife, like so for example, we're watching the most recent season of The Boys. And at the most basic level, The Boys is revenge porn against Justice League. It's just what it is. So, I mean, I know that the book is probably very good, but at the most basic level, that's kind of what it is.
Right.
So, for the Suicide Squad, or the Dirty Dozen going after the most superpowered people in the world. So, and then also focusing on the corporatization of superheroing or whatever, and there's some really solid messages in that first season, which is kind of wrapped in this layer of people have abilities and they fight. So this season, we were triggered for a couple of episodes specifically as Black folks. I've never read the comic book, but spoiler, there's a hero who is actually there's a gender change, from a man to a woman, and her name is Stormfront. I think Stormfront, and
Wait,
she's
you
like.
haven't spoiled the comic, right?
Oh, I was actually about to spoil the TV show, but if not, I
maybe
can.
we
If you
should.
okay, so I'll hold off. So let me just say this. I can actually still make my point.
Yes.
There's something that happens that as Black viewers, with everything that's going on right now, that we had to take a breath. We had to take a minute, and
I know
and that's
exactly what
happened.
you're talking about. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that happened over like the past 2 episodes, and these episodes are written way before George Floyd was murdered before our eyes. But we're looking at this stuff, and the sad thing is there were still other police murders that they still were able to pull from. So looking at that, I think like what is going through a writer's head? They're pulling from real life, from what's actually happening, and wrapping it up within a universe where people can run fast as, enough to break the sound barrier. We have an evil Superman or whatever, but you're still kind of learning. So for people who aren't used to being harassed and ridiculed and whatever because of the skin color, I'll just put it like this: somebody in Middle America watching this is hopefully learning something. We use the example of Watchmen. I knew about the Oklahoma riots or the massacre, the Tulsa massacre. I knew about planes skybombing Black people because they have the audacity to, be economically thriving, and so I've known about all of that, but to have a show like that open with that, with the seeming like origin of a superhero, you balance that against like Bruce Wayne's parents getting shot in an alley. For me, it's more effective to see, it's more effective as me as a Black man to see this massacre lead to this man wanting to right the wrongs, that have been kind of bestowed upon his people. So this is not going to stop. Once these companies, I think HBO specifically, they see the example of a Watchmen, they see the example of a Lovecraft Country. The only thing that matters to them is money. So as long as these stories are bringing in money, they will act woke. So, so get ready, because we have no shortage of content out there. And even if it's not HBO or Hulu or Amazon Prime, creators are doing their best to get their works out to people through a variety of venues. It could be, online streaming with another host. It could be independently. But the thing is we've been here with these stories for a while, and Hollywood is just catching up to us.
Yeah.
So I think that there is a really, and look behind me, Star Trek. Star Trek's been doing that since day one.
Right.
They're wrapping this political, social, racial allegories within these fantastical stories. That's actually one of the main reasons why Star Trek is my favorite fandom of all time versus like something like Star Wars. Star Wars is always just rock and roll to me. It's just some fanboys, trying to think of the right way to say this without offending a Star Wars fan. I like Star Wars. But to me, there's never been anything more deep outside of the Empire representing like a totalitarian regime.
Right.
With Star Trek, that was Roddenberry's goal from jump. To teach, to change, because he was watching what was happening at the time, the rise of feminism, the rise of the equality of races, and then sadly enough, he couldn't deal with like LGBTQ issues at the time, but he at least set out with the goal of trying to better humanity.
Right.
And also in Star Wars, I only saw like 1 or 2 Black people in the background. And I couldn't relate to that being a kid on the south side of Chicago.
Right.
I just, that was not relatable to me. And Billy D wasn't enough for me. So I'm sorry. but yeah, Michelle Nichols all day. But I like Star Wars. I love the stories that are told. But I love sci-fi that makes you think and you can still have a good time with it.
Right.
So a long-winded answer. Sorry.
Perfect.
No, it's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. So going back to Son of a Jackal, was there anything particularly challenging when writing that script?
Jack. Just being straight up Jack. So from reading the series, I always want to get her name wrong. Is it Markeisha?
Markeisha, yeah.
Markeisha. Okay, so Orson and Markeisha, I can get that. We've seen various instances of the two of them going at it or having good conversations, deep conversations. But Jack to me was an unknown quantity because spoiler. I mean, I can say it right. If y'all
he doesn't get much page space. Let's put it that way.
He doesn't get much praise. Like he dies. So I don't, at least from the stuff that I've read, outside of people probably talking about him, there's not much page or screen time with him. So I wanted to make sure that I felt more comfortable with finding Orson's voice than I did with Jack.
Right.
And Jack is the looming ghost over this entire story.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I was hoping I got right. So
Yeah, you did. I mean, the thing is that Jack ultimately, at the end of the day, his whole idea was that he was supposed to be the everyman superhero type.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's supposed to be the blonde-haired, blue-eyed action hero
that we're all tired.
That we're all tired of seeing. Who's quippy and fun and interesting, and then in this world, he's just not going to work. So it's sort of like that idea. Like I think you captured his confidence. I think you captured his. Again, I haven't really had much chance to write him. Again, because he has such limited page space, but we do have him as a pretty fully fleshed out character, and you got him beautifully.
Thanks.
And I love this whole idea of him being a looming ghost.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a really great term for it, because I feel like he is very much this sort of. I guess that's one of the things that also really bothers me about a lot of like superhero or comic or even most of media. It's like if a character dies, people just move on like it's not a thing. Or there's no like actual residual like aftershock or after effect. They don't really like showing grief because grief isn't convenient for a story. It's sort of like whoever said that hasn't read the majority of God knows how many things that actually focus on grief. And for me, like that, it was really important that, you know, you gave Orson the space to kind of still see that this is still affecting him. Like,
Yeah.
we get to see that it's affecting Audrey. We get to see that it's affecting Link. But when it comes to Orson, he's just so closed off that, you know, now we finally get to see that. And I think that that's just, I don't know. I'm a big fan. You're just brilliant, Robert.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, and I wanted to do him justice, you know. And I, like I said, I hope I did that. I find that more of the fiction that I gravitate to is when, you know, somebody's broken, somebody is kind of dealing with an issue. I mean, we talked about Route 3. This kid is dealing with his mother wasn't shot in a back alley, or she wasn't killed in like some big epic display of villainy or whatever. She dies of cancer.
Right.
So in the case of Route 3, we're dealing with a kid who is still months after, he's still dealing with that. He's still coping with it. He is, broken to a certain degree, and then he's endowed with these awesome set of abilities. So it's just like, is this the person that we want to, be our new Superman, who is, quietly grieving? So those stories are more interesting to me than somebody who can just knock you out, and clean, save the day and then just fly off. That's just kind of, where my sensibilities lie. I think one of the best examples of that is a series called Queen and Country, done by Greg Rucka. And you want to talk about a body count that keeps up, and you feel the effects of that. You feel the effects of, it's not just killing people for the sake of killing people, it's killing people and how that affects the other characters moving forward. Primarily the main character being Tara Chase. So yeah, but that's my school of writing that I come from.
And what was that book?
It's called Queen and Country.
Queen.
It was published by Oni Press, early to mid 2000s. But yeah, most people I think know Greg Rucka now for The Old Guard that just came out on Netflix recently. So, but yeah, so that's the same dude.
Well, I know a lot of people are struggling this year, and I wanted to kind of get your take on this. What does self-care and self-kindness look like to you in 2020?
So self-care means, doing what makes you happy as long as you're not hurting anybody else. So I said this online, I see a therapist, because for me, I can get into my head a lot, and dealing with, yeah, I think all of us, all the creative folks, but I've had a long kind of running battle when it comes to dealing with stress, anxiety, and depression. And it's gotten better, but it's one of those things that, when I was by myself, it was easier. It wasn't even easier to deal with it. Sometimes I would deal with it, sometimes I wouldn't. And when you get married and you have somebody who's kind of seeing that on not a daily basis, but off and on, it can affect the other person. And so one of my biggest goals was because as a spouse, you don't want to see that, and it negatively does affect the relationship. Real talk. So one of the things that I realized is that I need to get a handle on this, on a regular basis, at least until the point where I can feel more at ease. But even if, my wife wasn't in the picture, that would have to be something I would, have to be doing, so yeah, therapy if you have medical insurance, if you can find a place with a sliding scale and you need the help, there's nothing wrong with doing that. The other part of that, you said, was it self-care, and what was the other part?
Self-kindness.
Self-kindness. Just tell myself I'm that dude. You know, I can be happy. Like I am my own worst critic. Like people can, you know, tell me like, oh, your stuff sucks and da 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 da. And I'm like, I already beat you to that point. I tore myself down yesterday. So haha, I got you. But that's so one of the things is I had to realize like I have to stop not being kind to myself. You know, I have to, you know, see my, and that comes along with the therapy, but also realizing that I'm a decent human being. Now, have I done things that aren't good? Like, no, nobody's, what do you say, foul, not fouling, or whatever the word is, but nobody's perfect. You know, but those things aren't going to define me. And if, as long as I shoot for getting better, I should be fine. But yeah, but yeah, like I said, I try to be as kind to myself as possible. Sometimes, you know, I'm doing better with it, but there are times where I do feel like, you know, crap, and I kind of tell myself that. But then, you know, just you know, I try to be as kind to myself after that as possible. So it's not productive. Nothing gets done. Like, yeah, nothing gets done when you're depressed. You feel like crap. So.
Yeah, it's interesting because it seems like I mean everyone can have mental health issues, but I think like creatives specifically have a very particular brand of self-criticism. But yeah, but I'm glad that, you know, I'm so happy you mentioned therapy. It's something that I always advocate to people. And yeah, I'm glad that you do have that for yourself.
I'm glad you have it. It's, I also think it's just, okay, so as somebody who, you know, went to therapy for a while, it was like, especially in the South, there's like this weird, like, it's like you don't,
Stigma.
yeah, thank you, stigma. That's a good word for it.
Yeah, I'm glad it's becoming less destigmatized.
Yeah.
It's just becoming destigmatized. There we go.
But it's especially true for men, and that's one of the things that I've noticed, at least as somebody who's, you know, going for therapy. It's sort of like the idea of a, you know, my parents' generation would be like, you know, she's going to therapy. Like, versus,
like we have this weird expectation, like you should be strong enough to just power through it, or strong enough to get over it.
Yeah, and it's even worse for men.
Right,
like the idea that, you know, you can't, you know, pull yourself up and deal with it.
You just need more bourbon. That's what you need.
And then I've been to AA meetings, not for myself, but for other people. So I know that's not a way. That's definitely not a way to go.
Oh yeah, this is like you want more problems. That's what you do.
Putting fuel in the rocket and pointing it downward.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm really glad that you mention, and that you're, you know, not to say brave enough, but just like you're open about the fact that.
Yeah. I mean, it's helped. I mean, and you know, when you were talking about with men, I mean, specifically with Black men, you know, there's a stigma. You know, I think there's a stigma within, you know, Black America. You know, to you know, as far as when it comes with, I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. It's like if you want to talk about trauma, like almost on the daily,
exactly. And not even, you know, the generational trauma, but then also just the trauma of, you know, being a human being in this world, but also being a Black human being in this world. So it's one of those things where see if it's for you. You know, if you know, as far as that's the thing that I suggest, it may not be. And also, the first person you go see is not the first person that you will necessarily connect with. It was funny because that actually happened this time. Like I think the first person they sent me to, it wasn't clicking. And then, you know, the place that I went to, they found somebody else that was a perfect fit. So I can only talk about, you know, how it's helped me, you know, and, you know, but I do feel it's something that, you know, you need to find a way to mentally disconnect, you know, from the stressors from today. So, and I find that you know, that works, you know, but, you know, going to the beach, maybe one way to do it, or just kind of chilling, you know, but I feel that everybody needs to find their space, you know, in which to unwind, because if you are constantly just at it, you know, just life, that will mess you up.
Yeah.
So.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And we're reaching the end, but is there anything you are working on right now that you want to promote? And also, where can people find you online?
Yeah, so let's start with where you can find me online. So it's Robert K. Jeffrey, JEFFREY.com. It's robertkjeffrey.com. On Twitter, you can still find me on Twitter, SYN as in Nathan, CHRKJ, which apparently I created the screen name because I didn't know how to use Twitter. So I just decided to just use a favorite superhero, Synced RKJ. On Facebook, robert.k.jeffrey, and then it should be the same on Instagram. But all my links are on my website at robertkjeffrey.com. As far as upcoming projects, so first and foremost, what we're talking about here, Son of a Jackal in the Short Circuits anthology?
Yep.
Yeah, Short Circuits anthology, and so that'll be coming from Takeia Marie and myself. And with 133 Art, we next month people will be able to pre-order a copy of a first issue of a series called The Crossing, which I co-created, and I'm co-writing with John McGuire, and it's co-created and drawn by Sean Hill, magnificent Sean Hill, and we call that Sliders Meets Mission Impossible.
Nice.
So Sliders Meets Mission Impossible. Mind to Avenge, the third issue, we should have an announcement about that at the end of October. So just look out for news for that, as far as good news. And I think after that, there might be, those might be the only comics that I have coming out for the remainder of this year. So yeah, those two or three, and a bunch of client work that I should be able to talk about next year,
Okay.
or maybe later this year. Yeah, because I'm turning in scripts for, oh no, this is the biggest thing. I don't know why I just missed this. Two things. I need to keep a list. Tony K is rebooting a character, Amber Fox, into Autumn Fox, and we are getting closer to the Kickstarter for the first issue for that. It's a series that actually deals with science fiction action, but it's also has a focus on human trafficking. And I had a chance to write that, and the artwork is coming in, and it looks very great. So there's that, and I recently announced that I've become the lead writer with a new company called Subsume Media, which is run by Dedrin Sneed of Sorghum and Sphere fame, and the Eisner Award-winning Marco Lopez of Puerto Rico Strong. So yeah, so the goal of this is, like, we're a multimedia company, which our focus is on just bringing stories to life through whatever medium that we can. So in our first project that we actually have coming up is we did a comic book for an app developer based around one of their games called Armidas, and it's a sci-fi exploration game which teaches like the principles of STEM to children. So I had a chance to write that, and the story has actually been drawn by the Mind to Avenge team, which is pretty cool. And I think the last thing with Subsume is I'm the lead writer on an upcoming series called Soul Nebula, and just think of it like this: what if MAGA went to space? And and what chaos that would cause. So we're basically, so we're basically dealing with the racism and bigotry and more kind of galactic arena. So it's a little bit of Star Trek meets The Expanse.
Ooh, interesting.
Yes.
I knew that book was going to be a long one.
Yeah. I like it's one of those things where, and that might be what part of my afternoon is spent doing, is just making sure that I'm staying on top of things. But and there are other things coming down the pipeline that I've turned scripts in for. And, I actually wrote my first animated pilot and got paid for it. Yeah. It was that was another bucket list goal, because I love great animation, like Avatar: The Last Airbender and Korra, and Batman the Animated Series going back in the day. So to have a chance to pretty much help build this universe with the pilot script was pretty awesome, and to get paid for it was also
That is so cool.
that's also great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So it's a long list, but good things coming. Good things coming.
Yeah, sounds like it. Well, thank you so much for your time, Robert. I really appreciate it. And also for our viewers, please check out Takeia Marie's website as well. You can find her artwork at takeiamarie.com. She's also Takeia Marie on Twitter as well. So give her a follow. Thanks again for the awesome interview, and thanks for working on Son of a Jackal.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.